The stars were dying. One by one, entire worlds went dark across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire moved like a plague through space, taking everything in their path. Their black ships looked like living things, growing and changing as they flew. Through the void, Captain Jake Morrison sat in his chair on the bridge of the New Horizon. His ship was small compared to the great war vessels of other races, but it was fast and smart. Jake had spent 5 years exploring the far reaches of space, finding new worlds for human colonies. "Captain, we're getting a signal," said Lisa Carter from her station. She was the ship's communications officer, a young woman with bright eyes and quick hands. "It's weak, but it's coming from the Kepler system." Jake leaned forward. The Kepler system was far from human space, but not so far that they couldn't help if someone needed it. "Put it through." The message crackled with static. A voice spoke in broken words, fear clear in every syllable. "Please ... Anyone who can hear this, the Zephyrians are coming. Our fleets are gone, billions of our people are dead. They take everything ... They eat worlds ... The bridge fell silent. Jake's crew looked at each other with worry. They had heard stories about the Zephyrians, but always from far away. Now it seemed the monsters were real. "Where is this coming from?" Jake asked. Lisa worked at her controls. "The Altarian Republic, sir, or what's left of it. I'm reading 17 different distress signals from their territory. They're all saying the same thing." Danny Walsh, the ship's science officer, pulled up a star map on the main screen. Red dots marked the Zephyrian advance. System after system had gone dark. "Captain, if this is accurate, they've conquered half the Altarian Republic in just 6 months." Jake studied the map. The Zephyrians moved in a pattern, taking one system completely before moving to the next. They didn't just defeat their enemies. They consumed them. Every report spoke of worlds stripped bare, their people gone, their resources taken. "How far are they from human space?" Jake asked. Danny ran the numbers. "At their current speed, maybe 2 years. Maybe less." The thought sent a chill through the bridge. Humanity had colonies scattered across dozens of systems. If the Zephyrians kept moving, they would reach human worlds eventually. "Set course for Altaria Prime," Jake ordered. "We need to see what we're dealing with." His pilot, Amy Rodriguez, looked back at him. "Sir, that's deep into Zephyrian territory. If they're as dangerous as these reports say, then we need to know how dangerous they really are," Jake said. "The safety of human space might depend on it." The New Horizon jumped to hyperspace, leaving the safety of explored space behind. For 3 days, they traveled toward the Altarian homeworld, picking up more distress signals along the way. Each one told the same story. The Zephyrians came, they fought, they won, and then they took everything. When they dropped out of hyperspace at Altaria Prime, Jake's crew gasped. The world that had once been home to 3 billion Altarians was an empty shell. The oceans were gone. The forests were gone. Even the mountains had been carved away. What remained was a gray, lifeless ball of rock. "My God," whispered Lisa. "They really did eat the whole planet." Around the dead world, massive ships drifted in orbit. Each one was the size of a small moon, their black holes rippling like living skin. Strange lights pulsed under their surface, and long tentacles reached out to touch the planet's surface, still feeding on whatever remained. "Those are Zephyrian bioships," Vanny said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're not just machines. They're alive." Kevin Brooks, the tactical officer, ran every scan he could. "Captain, I'm reading energy signatures, unlike anything in our databases. These ships ... they're growing. They're using the planet's matter to make themselves bigger and stronger." Jake watched the alien ships with growing dread. Humanity had fought wars before, but always against enemies they could understand. These things were different. They didn't just want to win. They wanted to consume everything that lived. How many ships are there? He asked. Kevin counted the readings. 43 in this system alone. And sir, I think they know we're here. 3 of the bioships began to move toward the new horizon. They moved smoothly through space, their hulls changing shape as they approached. What had looked like smooth curves became sharp edges and weapon ports. They're scanning us, Lisa reported, but it's not like any scan I've ever seen. It's in my head. Jake felt it too. A cold presence touched his mind, reading his thoughts, learning about his ship and his crew. The Zephyrians weren't just looking at them. They were studying them, trying to understand what kind of creatures they were. The lead bioship sent a message directly into their minds. The voice was ancient and cold, speaking words that appeared in their thoughts rather than their ears. Unknown species. You have seen the fate of those who oppose the Zephyrian Empire. Your worlds will be consumed. Your people will become part of our collective. Submit now, and your death will be swift. Jake stood from his command chair. Every instinct told him to run, to get his ship and crew away from these monsters. But he thought of the human colonies, of the billions of people who had no idea what was coming for them. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Colonial Navy, he said aloud, knowing they would hear his thoughts. We don't submit to anyone. If you want our worlds, you'll have to take them. The Zephyrian response was immediate. The bioships opened fire. The bioplasma charges hit the new horizon like fists of burning light. The ship's shields flared and sparked as the alien weapons found their mark. Jake grabbed his chair as the deck shook under his feet. Shields at 60%, Kevin called out. These weapons are unlike anything we've faced before. They're not just energy. They're somehow alive. Amy Rodriguez threw the ship into a spinning dive that would have torn apart most vessels. But the new horizon was built by humans, and humans knew how to build ships that could take punishment. Evasive maneuvers engaged. Let's see if these things can keep up. The 3 Zephyrian bioships moved to follow, but something strange happened. They seemed confused by the human ship's movements. Where other species flew in straight lines and predictable patterns, the new horizon danced through space like a leaf in the wind. They're having trouble targeting us, Kevin reported with surprise. Their weapons keep missing. Jake allowed himself a small smile. Fire quantum torpedoes. Full spread. The New Horizons weapons struck the lead bioship square in its center. The explosion should have torn a hole in its hull, but instead, the ship's surface rippled like water. The wounds began to close almost immediately, the organic hull healing. Itself, direct hit, but no damage, Kevin said. The ship absorbed our weapons somehow. Danny Walsh ran scan after scan from his station. Captain, these bioships are learning from our attacks. Each time we fire, they adapt. Our weapons are becoming less effective. The Zephyrian ships fired again, their bioplasma charges coming closer to their target. The New Horizons shields flickered and failed under the assault. Shields down, Kevin announced. Hull damage on decks 3 and 4. Jake made a decision that would echo through history. All stop. Open a channel 2. Earth Command. Priority Alpha. Sir? Amy looked back at him with confusion. We're stopping in the middle of a battle? We can't win this fight, Jake said. But we can make sure Earth knows what's coming. The Zephyrian bioships slowed their approach, seeming to sense that the human vessel was no longer a threat. They drifted closer, their hulls pulsing with that strange blue light. Lisa opened the channel to Earth. The signal would take hours to reach human space, but it would get there. Channel open, Captain. Jake looked at the alien ships surrounding them and spoke clearly into the recorder. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the New Horizon. We have encountered the Zephyrian Empire. They are not like any enemy we have faced before. Their ships are alive, they adapt to our weapons, and they consume entire worlds. Humanity must prepare for war. The largest bioship moved to within a few hundred meters of the New Horizon. Its hull opened like a flower, revealing rows of smaller ships inside. These were not the massive bioships, but smaller craft designed for one purpose: boarding. "They're sending boarding parties," Kevin said. 20 ships, each carrying what looks like a squad of soldiers. Jake drew his sidearm. "All hands, prepare to repel boarders." This is not a drill. The Zephyrian boarding craft attached themselves to the New Horizon's hull like parasites. The sound of cutting tools echoed through the ship as the aliens began. To slice through the outer hull dot, the first Zephyrian soldier to board the New Horizon was a nightmare made real. It stood 7 feet tall, its body a mixture of organic tissue and mechanical parts. Cables and wires ran under its skin, and its eyes glowed with the same blue light as the bioships. But when it raised its weapon to fire, Jake was faster. His plasma pistol put 3 shots into the creature's chest, dropping it to the deck. The Zephyrian soldier writhed for a moment, then lay still. "They can be killed," Jake called out over the ship's intercom. "Fight back. Show them what humans are made of." The battle for the New Horizon raged through the ship's corridors. The Zephyrian soldiers were stronger and better armed, but they had never faced humans before. They were used to enemies who fought in formations, who followed predictable tactics. Amy Rodriguez left her pilot station and grabbed a rifle from the weapons locker. She moved through the ship's service tunnels, appearing behind Zephyrian soldiers, and disappearing before they could react. Her shots were precise, taking down aliens twice her size. Danny Walsh used his knowledge of the ship's systems to trap a squad of boarders in the cargo bay, then vented the atmosphere to space. The Zephyrian soldiers, for all their biological and mechanical enhancements, still needed air to breathe. Lisa Carter coordinated the defense from the bridge, using the ship's internal sensors to track the invaders. She guided human crew members to safety while leading the aliens into carefully prepared traps. Kevin Brooks turned the ship's defensive systems against the boarders. Security fields and emergency bulkheads became weapons, crushing and trapping the Zephyrian soldiers. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, the New Horizon was damaged but not destroyed. More importantly, they had captured 3 Zephyrian soldiers alive. The bioships in orbit had watched the battle with what seemed like curiosity. When it became clear that the humans had won, they began to withdraw, but not before sending one final message into the minds of the New Horizon's crew. "Interesting. You fight differently than the others. We will study you. We will learn. And then we will return to consume your worlds." The alien ships disappeared into hyperspace, leaving the New Horizon alone in the ruins of the Altarian system. Jake looked at his battered crew and felt a mixture of pride and fear. They had survived their first encounter with the Zephyrians, but just barely, and now the aliens knew about humanity. "Danny, I want everything you can learn from those prisoners," Jake ordered. "Lisa, get me another channel to Earth Command. Tell them we're coming home, and we're bringing intelligence about the enemy." The New Horizon limped away from Altaria Prime, its hull scarred but its crew alive. Behind them, the dead world continued, its silent orbit, a warning of what the Zephyrians could do. But something had changed in that battle. For the first time in their conquest of the galaxy, the Zephyrians had met an enemy that fought back in ways they couldn't predict. They had won the battle, but they had also learned something that would prove crucial in the war to come. Humans were different, and different meant dangerous. As the New Horizon jumped to hyperspace, carrying its warning to Earth, The first phase of the greatest war in galactic history had begun. The Zephyrians had made their first mistake. They had shown themselves to humanity that now the real fight could begin. The emergency session of the United Earth Defense Council began at dawn. Admiral Helen Parker stood before the holographic display, showing the extent of the Zephyrian threat. 17 star systems had gone dark, and the alien advance showed no signs of slowing. "How long do we have?" asked General Mike Thompson, his weathered face grave with concern. Admiral Parker touched the display, zooming in on the projected path of the Zephyrian fleet. "Based on Captain Morrison's report and our analysis of their movement patterns, 18 months. Maybe less if they speed up their advance." The room fell silent. 18 months to prepare for an enemy that had never been defeated. An enemy that consumed entire worlds and grew stronger with each victory. "What about the other galactic powers?" asked Secretary of Defense Carol Stevens. "Surely they'll help us fight this threat." Admiral Parker shook her head. "The Regellian Federation has already fallen. The Centauri Alliance is in full retreat. Every major military force that's faced the Zephyrians has been completely destroyed. We're on our own." General Thompson studied the tactical data on his tablet. "Tell me about their weaknesses." Morrison's report mentioned that they seemed confused by our ship's movements. "That's our best lead," Admiral Parker replied. "The Zephyrians adapt to conventional tactics and weapons, but they've never faced humans before. Our unpredictability might be the key to victory." She pulled up footage from the New Horizons battle. "Look at this." When our ship moved erratically, their targeting systems couldn't keep up. When our crew fought using improvised tactics, their soldiers couldn't adapt fast enough. Dr. Paul Mitchell, the military's chief xenobiologist, stood up from his seat. "I've been studying the Zephyrian prisoners we captured. Their biological and mechanical systems are incredibly advanced, but they have a critical weakness. They're networked." He activated his own holographic display, showing the internal structure of a Zephyrian soldier. Every bioship, every soldier, every piece of their technology is connected to a central command network. It's what allows them to adapt so quickly. But it's also what makes them vulnerable. "Vulnerable how?" Admiral Parker asked. "Disruption," Dr. Mitchell explained. "If we can interfere with their network communications, we can shut down their adaptive abilities. I've been working on a radiation pulse that could do exactly that." The implications were enormous. If they could disrupt the Zephyrian network, even temporarily, it would level the playing field. "How long to develop this weapon?" General Thompson asked. 6 months, maybe less if we get full funding and support. Admiral Parker nodded. "You'll have whatever you need. But we need more than just new weapons. We need a completely new way of fighting." She turned to address the full council. "I'm recommending the activation of the Omega Protocol. Total military mobilization. Every ship, every soldier, every resource we have." The Omega Protocol hadn't been activated since the colonial wars 2 centuries ago. It meant that humanity was facing an existential threat, one that required every person to contribute to the war effort. "Are you sure this is necessary?" asked one of the council members. "We're talking about massive economic disruption." "I'm talking about survival," Admiral Parker replied. "The Zephyrians don't take prisoners. They don't negotiate. They consume everything in their path. If we don't stop them, there won't be an economy left to worry about." The vote was unanimous. Within hours, the greatest military buildup in human history began. The shipyards of Luna worked around the clock, their assembly lines producing new vessels at a rate never before seen. The Mars orbital platforms retooled their manufacturing to create weapons and armor. The asteroid mining operations shifted to extracting materials for the war effort, but the most important work was happening in the research labs. Carol Stevens led a team of engineers developing new weapon systems designed specifically to combat the Zephyrian threat. Their breakthrough came when they combined Dr. Mitchell's radiation pulse with a new type of quantum weapon. "We're calling it the Chaos Drive," Carol explained to the military leadership. "Instead of firing conventional energy beams, it generates random quantum fluctuations. No two shots are exactly the same. The Zephyrians can't adapt to something. That changes every time." The first test of the Chaos Drive was conducted on a captured Zephyrian bioship component. The weapon struck the alien technology and tore it apart at the molecular level. More importantly, when they fired a second shot, the bioship's adaptive systems couldn't compensate for the different quantum signature. "It works," Carol announced. "We can hurt them." But weapons alone wouldn't win the war. Admiral Parker knew they needed to change how humans fought. She called together the best military minds from every branch of service. "The Zephyrians expect us to fight like everyone else," she told them. "Rigid formations, predictable tactics, conventional strategies. We're going to do the opposite." The new human doctrine emphasized speed, flexibility, and unpredictability. Instead of large fleets engaging in set-piece battles, they would use small, fast-moving squadrons that could strike quickly and disappear before the enemy could adapt. Training began immediately. Pilots learned to fly in patterns that seemed random but were actually carefully calculated to confuse targeting systems. Soldiers practiced fighting in small, independent units that could operate without central command. The first real test came sooner than expected. A Zephyrian advance. Fleet attacked the human colony of New Geneva, a mining world on the edge of human space. The Colonial Defense Force, led by Commander Betty Hughes, was outnumbered 10-1. "Remember your training," Betty told her pilots as they launched to meet the alien fleet. "No formations, no patterns. Make them guess what you're going to do next." The battle lasted 3 hours. The human ships, equipped with the new Chaos Drive weapons, struck at the Zephyrian bioships from every angle. When the aliens adapted to one attack pattern, the humans switched to something completely different. For the first time in their conquest of the galaxy, the Zephyrians were forced to retreat. 3 of their bioships were destroyed, and the rest fled back to their territory. The news of the victory spread through human space like wildfire. Humanity could fight back. They could win. But Admiral Parker knew this was just the beginning. The Zephyrians would learn from their defeat, just as they learned from every battle. The next encounter would be harder. She stood in the command center, watching the tactical displays show the enemy's response to their defeat. The Zephyrian fleet was regrouping, growing larger, preparing for a massive assault on human space. "They're coming," she said to General Thompson. "All of them. This was just a probe. The real war is about to begin." The general nodded grimly. "Are we ready?" Admiral Parker looked at the displays, showing the vast human fleet assembling at the edge of their territory. Ships from every world, crews from every colony, all united in the face of an enemy that threatened their very existence. "We're as ready as we can be," she said. "Now we find out if it's enough." The stage was set for the greatest battle in galactic history. Humanity had shown they could fight the Zephyrians, but the real test was yet to come. In the depths of space, 2 forces prepared to clash in a conflict that would determine the fate of the galaxy. The war for survival had begun. The Rigel system had become a graveyard of ships. Twisted metal and bioorganic matter drifted through space where once proud fleets had fought and died. The Zephyrians had turned this system into their forward base, a staging ground for their final assault on human space. Admiral Helen Parker stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Earth's Pride, watching the massive enemy fleet through the viewscreen. Over 200 bioships filled the space around Rigel's 4th planet, their hulls pulsing with that familiar blue light. Each ship was larger than anything humans had ever built, and they moved with the fluid grace of living creatures. "Fleet. Status report," she ordered. Commander Tony Williams, captain of the battleship Defiant, appeared on the communication screen. "All ships are in position, Admiral. 3,000 vessels ready for battle." It was the largest fleet in human history. Ships from every colony, every world, every station had answered the call. Massive dreadnoughts flew alongside small fighters, all crewed by volunteers who had left everything behind to join the fight. "Remember," Admiral Parker broadcast to the entire fleet, "we're not just fighting for humanity. We're fighting for every species that's ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of freedom." The Zephyrian fleet began to move, their bioships forming the same attack formation that had terrorized the galaxy for decades. It was a pattern of overwhelming force, designed to crush any resistance through sheer numbers and firepower. Admiral Parker had studied every battle the Zephyrians had ever fought. She knew their tactics, their methods, their weaknesses. And she had a plan. "All ships execute pattern Omega," she ordered. The human fleet scattered like drops of water hitting stone. Instead of meeting the Zephyrian formation head-on, they spread out in all directions, attacking from every angle simultaneously. Small squadrons of fighters dove through gaps in the enemy lines, while heavy cruisers struck from the flanks. The Zephyrians had never faced anything like it. Their bioships tried to adapt to the chaotic attack pattern, but every time they adjusted their formation, the humans switched to something completely different. Commander Susan Clark led Fox Squadron, a group of 20 fighters loaded with the new radiation bombs. "Fox Squadron, this is lead. We're going for the command ship. Stay low and keep moving." Her fighters screamed through the battle, dodging bioplasma charges and tentacle-like weapons that tried to grab them from space. The Zephyrian command ship was a monster, twice the size of any other vessel in their fleet, its hull crawling with defensive systems. "Deploying radiation bombs," Susan announced. "Let's see how they like this." The bombs struck the command ships, hull and exploded in bursts of specific radiation designed to disrupt the Zephyrian neural networks. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The massive bioship began to convulse, its movements becoming erratic as its control systems failed. "It's working," Susan reported. "The command ship is losing control." Captain Tony Williams seized the moment. His battleship Defiant and its escort squadron moved in for the kill. "All ships, concentrate fire on the command vessel. Hit them with everything we've got." The Chaos Drive weapons struck the wounded command ship like hammer blows. Without its adaptive systems functioning properly, the bioship couldn't heal its wounds or adjust its defenses. Massive holes appeared in its hull, and the organic matter inside began to leak into space. But the Zephyrians were not finished. The remaining bioships, freed from the rigid control of the command vessel, began to fight with a desperate fury. They abandoned their formations and attacked individually, using tactics the humans had never seen before. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, now commanding her own destroyer, found herself face to face with a Zephyrian bioship that had somehow learned to mimic human attack patterns. "This one's copying our moves," she reported. "It's fighting like a human ship." The battle became a deadly dance as the two vessels circled each other, each trying to predict the other's next move. But Amy had something the bioship didn't: intuition. At the last second, she broke from her pattern and fired a full spread of quantum torpedoes. The bioship, caught off guard by the sudden change, took the full impact. It tumbled through space, its hull split open, its biomechanical systems failing. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. The human fleet, trained to fight without rigid patterns, adapted to each new threat. When the Zephyrians tried to copy their tactics, the humans simply changed them again, but the cost was enormous. Human ships were being destroyed, their crews lost to the void. The destroyer New York exploded in a ball of fire when a bioship's tentacle wrapped around its hull and crushed it. The cruiser Berlin disappeared in a cloud of bioplasma when its captain tried to ram a Zephyrian vessel. "We're losing too many ships," reported Commander Williams. "At this rate, we won't have enough left to press the attack." Admiral Parker watched the tactical display with growing concern. The battle was turning in humanity's favor, but barely. They needed something more, something that would tip the scales decisively. That's when Captain Rick Davis of the heavy cruiser Vengeance made a decision that would be remembered forever. His ship had taken massive damage, its engines failing, its weapon systems barely functional. But he was still alive, and he still had one weapon left. "Admiral, this is Captain Davis. My ship is finished, but I've got one last card to play." "Rick, what are you doing?" Admiral Parker asked, but she already knew. "For humanity," Rick said. Simply. The Vengeance changed course, its dying engines pushing it toward the largest concentration of Zephyrian bioships. The aliens fired everything they had at the approaching vessel, but Rick kept coming. When the Vengeance struck the bioship cluster, its reactor went critical. The explosion was visible from across the system, a star being born and dying in the same instant. 12 Zephyrian bioships vanished in the blast, their organic hulls unable to withstand the raw fury of an antimatter explosion. The sight of the sacrifice galvanized the human fleet. Ships that had been retreating turned back to fight. Damaged vessels that should have withdrawn pressed their attacks. The tide of battle began to turn. "All ships advance," Admiral Parker ordered. "We finish this now." The human fleet surged forward, their weapons blazing. The Zephyrian bioships, already weakened by the radiation attacks and confused by the chaotic tactics, began to fall back. For the first time in their conquest of the galaxy, they were losing. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it was over, the space around Rigel was filled with the debris of both fleets. But more Zephyrian ships floated dead in space than human ones. "Fleet status," Admiral Parker ordered wearily. The reports came in from across the battlefield. The human fleet had lost over 1,000 ships, but they had destroyed nearly twice as many Zephyrian vessels. More importantly, they had broken the enemy's advance. "Admiral," came a transmission from the edge of the system. "This is the Altarian refugee ship Hope. We saw the battle. We can't believe it. You actually beat them." Similar messages began pouring in from across the galaxy. Species that had been hiding in the dark corners of space, survivors of the Zephyrian conquest, were witnessing something they had thought impossible. The monsters could be defeated, but Admiral Parker knew this was just the beginning. The Zephyrians would regroup, adapt, and return. The real war was just starting. She looked at her battered fleet and felt a mixture of pride and sorrow. They had proven that humanity could fight the Zephyrians and win, but the cost had been enormous, and the enemy was still out there. "All ships maintain formation," she ordered. "We're going after them. This time, we don't stop until every last Zephyrian is driven from this galaxy." The human fleet began to move, following the retreating bioships deeper into enemy territory. Behind them, the Rigel system was quiet for the first time in years. Its planets free from the shadow of the Zephyrian Empire. The galaxy was beginning to hope again. 3 years had passed since the Battle of Rigel. The war that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Zephyrians, who had grown used to easy victories, found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to be conquered. Colonel Frank Anderson crouched behind the ruins of what had once been a Zephyrian bioprocessing plant. The vegan system had been under alien control for 5 years, its surface stripped and reshaped into a factory for producing more bioships. Now, human ground forces were taking it back, one facility at a time. "Charlie team, report," Frank spoke. Into his radio. "Processing Plant 7 is secure," came the reply. The radiation charges worked perfectly. "The biomechanical systems are completely shut down." Frank smiled grimly. The ground war had taught humanity many things about fighting the Zephyrians. Their biomechanical installations were vulnerable to the same radiation that disrupted their ships. A few well-placed charges could bring down an entire facility. "All teams, advance to the next target," Frank ordered. "Let's finish cleaning up this system." The liberation of Vega had taken 6 months of careful planning and brutal fighting. The Zephyrians had learned to adapt to human space tactics, but they had never faced human ground forces. The aliens fought with the same rigid patterns they used in space, while the humans moved like ghosts through the ruins of conquered worlds. But the real war was happening in space. Admiral Parker's fleet had grown to over 5,000 ships, reinforced by vessels from every liberated world. They had learned to fight the Zephyrians not through single massive battles, but through constant, relentless pressure. Captain Tony Williams stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching another bioship burn in the void. His ship had been refitted 3 times during the war, each time with better weapons and stronger armor. But the most important changes were in his crew. "Target destroyed," reported his tactical officer. "Enemy fleet is retreating to the Zephyrian." Homeworld, the homeworld. For 3 years, that had been the ultimate goal. The Zephyrians had built their empire from a massive biomechanical construct that had once been dozens of different planets. It was the heart of their power, the source of their strength. And now, finally, the human fleet was ready to attack it. The combined fleet that assembled for the final assault was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. 5,000 human ships flew alongside vessels from every species the Zephyrians had oppressed. The Altarians brought their sleek cruisers. The vegan survivors contributed their powerful fighters. Even the scattered remains of the Regelian Federation joined the fleet. Parker stood on the bridge of the Earth's Pride, looking at the tactical display showing the massive combined fleet. Ships from 100 different worlds, all united in their hatred of the Zephyrian Empire. "Admiral," came a transmission from the Altarian ship Hope. "We never thought we'd see this day. Our worlds have been free for 2 years now, but it still feels like a dream." "It's not a dream," Admiral Parker replied. "It's what happens when free people decide they've had enough of tyranny." The final battle began at the edge of the Zephyrian home system, the biomechanical construct that was there. Homeworld filled the space where a normal star system would have planets. It was a sphere of living metal and organic tissue, larger than most moons, pulsing with the combined power of their entire civilization. Around it, the largest Zephyrian fleet ever assembled waited in perfect formation. Over 3,000 bioships, each one a masterpiece of their terrifying technology. They had learned from their defeats, adapted to human tactics, and prepared for this final confrontation. "All ships," Admiral Parker broadcast to the combined fleet, "this is where we end it. For every world they've consumed, every life they've taken, every dream they've destroyed, today we make them pay." The battle that followed would be remembered as the greatest in galactic history. The Zephyrian bioships fought with a desperation they had never shown before. They abandoned their formations, using tactics that seemed almost human in their unpredictability, but the combined fleet was ready. 3 years of constant warfare had taught them how to fight these monsters. They moved like a living thing, adapting to every new threat, responding to every challenge. Commander Susan Clark, now leading an entire fighter wing, dove through the enemy formation with 200 ships behind her. "Phoenix Wing, this is lead. We're going for the homeworld's power core. Stay tight and keep moving." The fighters screamed through the battle, their small size allowing them to slip between the massive bioships. The Zephyrian homeworld's defenses were enormous, but they were designed to stop large vessels, not small, fast fighters that moved like angry wasps. "I've got a lock on the power core," Susan reported. "It's massive, but it's also vulnerable. One good hit with a radiation bomb should shut down their entire defensive grid." The approach was deadly. Bioplasma charges filled the space around the homeworld, and massive tentacles reached out to grab the approaching fighters. But the human pilots had learned to fly in ways that seemed impossible, twisting and turning through the defensive fire. Susan's fighter shook as a plasma charge grazed its hull. Her wingman, Lieutenant Pete Collins, wasn't so lucky. His ship took a direct hit and exploded in a ball of fire. "Pete's gone," Susan reported, her voice steady despite the loss. Continuing the attack run, the radiation bomb struck the homeworld's power core and exploded in a burst of disruptive energy. The effect was immediate and devastating. The massive biomechanical construct began to convulse, its defensive systems failing as the radiation interfered with its neural networks. "The homeworld's shields are down," Susan announced. "All ships, this is our chance." Captain Tony Williams led the main assault. His battleship Defiant and 50 other heavy cruisers moved in formation toward the wounded homeworld. Their chaos drive weapons struck the biomechanical surface, tearing massive holes in the organic armor, but the Zephyrians weren't finished. The bioships around the homeworld began to move in patterns that seemed almost suicidal. They threw themselves at the human fleet, using their own bodies as weapons when their guns failed. "They're ramming us," reported Captain Lisa Martinez of the destroyer Phoenix. "These things are going crazy." A battle became a desperate struggle. Ships on both sides were destroyed in massive explosions. The space around the homeworld filled with debris and the bodies of the fallen. But slowly, steadily, the combined fleet pressed forward. The moment that decided the war came when Captain Rick Davis's sacrifice was remembered. Commander Julie Harper, captain of the heavy cruiser Determination, saw her ship's engines failing and her crew wounded, but she also saw an opportunity. "This is Commander Harper," she broadcast to the fleet. "My ship is finished, but I can still make a difference. Tell my family I died fighting for freedom." The Determination, its hull split open and its systems failing, changed course toward the homeworld's central command nexus. The Zephyrians threw everything they had at the approaching vessel, but Julie kept coming. When the Determination struck the command nexus, the explosion was like a second sun. The ship's antimatter reactor overloaded, sending waves of destructive energy through the homeworld's biomechanical structure. The effect was immediate and total. The neural networks that controlled the entire Zephyrian empire began to shut down. Bioships across the galaxy suddenly stopped moving, their crews cut off from the collective consciousness that had guided them for so long. "All Zephyrian ships have stopped," reported the tactical officer on the Earth's Pride. "They're just drifting." Admiral Parker watched the tactical display with growing amazement. The bioships that had terrorized the galaxy for decades were powerless, their hulls going dark as their systems failed. "This is Admiral Parker to all ships," she broadcast. "The Zephyrian Empire is finished. The galaxy is free." The cheers that went up from the combined fleet could be heard across the communication channels. Ships from 100 different worlds celebrated together, their crews united in victory. But the celebration was tempered by the cost. Thousands of ships had been destroyed, and hundreds of thousands of people had died to achieve this victory. The price of freedom had been enormous. In the days that followed, the remaining Zephyrian bioships began to break apart. Without the central control network, they couldn't maintain their organic systems. The vast homeworld construct slowly crumbled, its biomechanical components dying and decaying, Some Zephyrian soldiers and smaller bioships escaped into deep space, but they were no longer a threat. Without their empire to support them, they became scattered refugees, haunted by the memory of their defeat. The galaxy began to rebuild. Worlds that had been stripped bare were slowly restored. Species that had been driven to the edge of extinction began to recover. The scars of the Zephyrian conquest would take generations to heal, but the healing had begun. Colonel Frank Anderson stood on the surface of New Alteria, watching as the first trees were planted in soil that had been lifeless. For a decade, around him, human and alien workers labored side by side, building a new world from the ashes of the old. "It's hard to believe it's over," said Commander Betty Hughes, who had joined the reconstruction effort after the war ended. Frank nodded, watching the young trees sway in the alien breeze. "My grandfather always said that fray